Today we're going to talk about Tante Ulrikkes by Zeshan Shakar. I have read books about growing up in Norway and Oslo before. The only problem is that they're all set in the 60s and 70s. So that's why I chose to read this book this time, because it's more close to home. In all the ways. What I mean by that is that the characters in the book are about my age and they don't live that far from where I'm sitting now. Also, this is Shakar's debut novel, and when it was published it nearly almost got positive reviews, so that also plays a part. The book is about Jamal and Mo. They grew up in Tante Ulrikkes Road, which is the title of the novel. This is a place in the eastern part of Oslo, and Oslo is pretty much divided into west and east in many ways, especially when it comes to the news, because the west side of Oslo is much more wealthy than the eastern part. You might say that the area the boys are from is in the media for the wrong kinds of reasons most of the time. We meet them when they are in high school in the year 2001, and we follow them for 5 years. The way we follow them is that the two boys each record their stories and send it off to a researcher. So there's one guy in Oslo who collects data and then is going to write a report about how it is growing up in Oslo. So that's basically the plot. First of all, I really enjoy how it was set up. So each chapter starts out with a mail address and who it's from and who it's to and when it was sent. And it's always about trying to figure out how it is growing up in Oslo. I listened to this book on audiobook, and this may be the perfect use of an audiobook because the format is so great. You basically had the two kids doing their monologues, and sometimes you switched between the two kids, and sometimes it just went on and on for one person. So you can have Mo talking about something, and then 2 months later it's still Mo talking to this third person. We rarely did hear anything from the third person, but that doesn't matter at all for the story. It was still great. Later this book has become a play in the theaters, and I would assume that this book is perfect for that role. In addition to this, Jamal uses a whole lot of words I do not know, and I thought it was easier listening to them because I have heard some of them before and I sort of made sense of them, but reading them out loud I thought I would have missed a lot of things. But then I realized that they are explained in the book, so if I just looked here, I might have understood it after all. After a while I got used to it, but now that I've finished reading this book, I'm not used to it at all. But I live in the area of the book, so a lot of people uses some of these words around me, and now I have a deeper understanding of what they actually are talking about. Earlier I've made a video I named Why Not Norwegian Books, because I felt like many people like to read something they know from before and not just expand their knowledge about new things. And both things are great, but I find looking for new perspectives is something that gives me something positive. And this book is maybe the perfect mix of, I'm basically reading about the place where I live at the same time that I don't recognize anything at all, nearly. Which is really fascinating and really hard to talk about. In addition to them having immigrant parents, I would say that the biggest difference is that they grew up here whilst I'm just living here. Which of course is a huge difference. Which brings me over to why this book is important. And I would say that the people that write the most books are the people with the most money. And thus you have a lot of books from the western part of Oslo and nearly none of significance from the eastern part of Oslo. So when this book came out, you could get a whole new insight into how it was growing up in this part of Oslo, which is really, really important, especially if you want to understand why the differences among people are growing. Since the events in this book starts in 2001, I straight from the beginning thought that the attacks on the Twin Towers were going to be discussed, and they were. And if there's something I've learned about my own reading, it's that I enjoy historical fiction. So having the discussion of the events with the Twin Towers from a completely different aspect than my own, and especially with those living in that area of Oslo with parents that are immigrants, without having read this book, it would be difficult for me to really understand how things must have been. So that was an aspect I really enjoyed about this book. Our two main characters are very different, and it's obvious why they are different, because the most interesting thing about the two main characters is how they are treated at home and how they have backing from the people around them. I found myself rooting for both of them throughout the novel, but I felt much more sorry for Jamal than Mo, just because Mo had backing from his parents, whereas Jamal had to do all the things himself. And I felt the real impact from this way of writing. And the reason why it's interesting that it's done this way is because we have this third person doing notes from these two guys. And seen from the outside, from the big society, these two people are both male, they're young, they're kids from immigrants, they live in the same building. So a lot of things seem similar, but when you get to know the families, they're so opposite. To sum that bit up, the most important thing is that I could feel the characters' pain and really feel like I was a part of their story. So the author did a great job in that department. Also, a weird thing about this, I felt like I was really connected to the story, and a bit of the timelessness. Being a youth in general can be quite similar in many ways, but then again, not at all. When I read it, I felt like we are not the same people at all, but I can recognize myself in many of the things that you experience, and I was sort of, when reading it, going back and forth and trying to figure out why I felt that this book hit me, and I couldn't really pinpoint why, other than being a teenager is terrible in many ways. I assume that the thing I will think the most about after I've read this book is how you judge people without knowing how they're doing at home and what responsibilities they have, because Jamal is really doing all that he can. And sometimes you get frustrated because you think that you can do better. Then again, you can't know how it is being him. The real struggle of life. I really couldn't find out if this book has been translated or not. I found out that the English translation is sold, so the rights for the book are sold. And this was 4 years ago, so I would believe that it would have become a book by now, but it hasn't, I think. Or at least I couldn't find it. If anyone knows, please tell me, because I would like to recommend this book to a lot of English-speaking people, because I loved it. So let me know. I think that's it. I can't really recommend this book enough, but I do think it's more impactful if you're Norwegian or you live in Oslo. But either way, I think it's a great book. If you have book recommendations for me in general, please comment below. And thank you for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!